I know the burning question on everyone's mind about this movie. Does the dog live? For starters, I will answer that question. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the movie before I get into that spoiler, that specific spoiler. Last night, I screened a new film, a new horror film called Good Boy. It originally, I think, was just going to have maybe a release only on Shudder, but they ended up deciding, or perhaps just a very limited release before heading over to Shudder. But I think after the trailer came out, there was so much excitement about it or hype about it that they decided to go. So if I'm not mistaken, it is going to come to theaters sometime next week, early October. As of the recording of this, it's September 25th, Thursday the 25th. And I think it's coming like in a week or, a week and a day or something like that. So I wanted to go ahead and get this review done. This was a movie directed by Ben Leonberg or Leonberg. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. But anyway, interestingly enough, the dog in this movie is his. And the film itself has a very unique hook. It is a horror story told entirely from the perspective of the dog. The dog's name in this movie is Indy. I think they do show on the TV a little clip of one of the Indiana Jones movies, which was kind of funny. And when I heard about this trailer, I did not watch the trailer intentionally because I decided I wanted to see the movie. But what this initially reminded me of was a werewolf movie from like the mid-ish 90s, maybe 94, called Bad Moon, starring Muriel Hemingway and Michael Paré. And that particular movie, it's not necessarily told completely from the dog's perspective, but there is a lot of focus on the dog because the dog can tell that there is something not quite right with this human that comes to visit his family. So this feels kind of similar, but it's different in a lot of ways. It's not a very long movie. It's only about 72 minutes. Honestly, sometimes it felt a little longer than that, which I'll touch on after a bit. And the film apparently took about 3 years to make. I mean, talk about dedication, I was impressed with. I know some movies have taken longer than that to make from start to finish, but from what I read, the crew worked around his natural schedule and his reactions. And even though he's the lead actor in this film, I was surprised to learn that he wasn't really trained for this role. Now, by trained, I don't mean, sit, stay, whatever, because that's kind of just your generic sort of training for a lot of dogs. And I feel very confident that this dog had that sort of training because let me tell you, that was one of the quietest dogs I have ever seen. If any of this stuff that went on happened with my dogs, they would have been screaming the first second. So this dog was trained very well to just not overreact, basically, even though he was curious and he knew something was up. But by trained, what I mean is he wasn't necessarily trained to go do this and go do that and act this way, act scared or, prompt him to act scared or do whatever. Basically, what they did for his performance was they coaxed it out of him with things like noises or treats or positioning. Very interesting. If they make a Blu-ray or a DVD of this, I would absolutely love to hear an audio commentary or see a behind the scenes featurette because this dog he was so adorable. He was such a dog. I love dogs. Anyway, the basic story is that was a long-winded intro sort of lead up to what this movie is about, which if you've seen the trailer, you already know. Indy's human goes to live in this old abandoned house of his grandfather's. Now he has some health ailments. It doesn't really specifically come out and say the C word, but it sounds to me like he has some type of cancer and he had treatment and now he's out of the hospital and he just wants a change of everything. So he goes to this house that his grandfather and his grandfather's dog had lived in. And his sister's worried about him because, she's his sister. She wants to take care of him. make sure he's all right. And so she keeps, trying to be in contact with him and whatever. I forgot what his name was, the human's name was. Anyway, it's not long after they go there. In fact, right when they get on the property, the dog senses something is off. And he doesn't overreact or just like bark at every little noise. He just he'll look and he'll study it, kind of whine just a little bit. His ears will, move around as he's trying to figure out what it is. So once they move there, these strange things start to just become more and more noticeable to the dog, not so much to the human, at least not for a good portion. I feel like by the end of it, the human was aware that something was going on, but since this is told entirely from the perspective of the dog, I don't really know. I'm just going on how I saw the human interacting with the dog in the story. And one of the things that was kind of a con to me, which I sort of talked myself out of that, is there's a lot of ambiguity as far as what's really going on. What is this presence? What is it? Okay. Is it just a ghost? Is it something that can possess? Because it seems like there were elements of that going on. You see stuff that happened to the grandfather because there's these old VHS tapes that the guy is watching. And so the grandfather and the grandfather's dog had similar things that they were experiencing. The reason I talked myself out of some of the frustration with the ambiguity of the story and the answers that I wanted is because just like a dog, maybe we're not meant to know and fully understand because this is from his perspective. He doesn't know what the hell is going on. He just knows something is scary and something is strange. And we get indicators from what we see based on what the dog is seeing. Oh, it's a ghost. Oh, it's this presence. Oh, it's possessing. It's doing some possession, but we don't really fully have all the pieces put together for us. And I'm actually okay with that now, whereas initially I was a little bit, but really, it's kind of unfair to feel that way. I think maybe you guys would disagree. Maybe you want all the answers. There's a large part of me that does want more answers because there was a lot of stuff that I was a little confused about. I didn't really understand what was happening. There are several pros to this story. Obviously, the first one, very evidently, the unique point of view. It's a refreshing take on horror, haunted house horror, because we're seeing this dog's authentic reactions to strange things. It adds realism to the story, especially once he wasn't trained to do this stuff. He is just reacting purely as he would. So I liked that. It's also got a very strong emotional pull because we fear for the dog's safety. I read that there was like 1,000% jump in traffic or activity relating to this film after the trailer came out because people were wanting to know if the dog died. My daughter said, I'm not going to watch it if the dog dies. So that was kind of funny. And, it's interesting. I get why people feel that way about animals. And some people get a little bit agitated that folks seem to care more about the death of an animal like a dog than the death of a human. I get the agitation, but at the same time, I also get the reason why people do care a lot about that is because, like with little tiny children, dogs are innocent and they don't know what's going on and they don't understand, and that's really scary. And so that adds for us this emotional pull, this emotional connection and wanting to reach out and protect. And like with humans, they do typically understand what's going on. A lot of times, maybe they're more capable of removing themselves from a bad situation, whereas a dog, not so much, So I think it's just the helplessness plus the confusion. It just combines together to create this situation that really stresses us out. Because I was stressed out several times watching this film. Another pro is that the film has very strong atmosphere. It's pretty doggone creepy, the stuff that's going on in this house. There's shadows and darkness, obviously. And I can excuse the fact that this is a very dark place because it seems like the house is being powered by a generator. So it's not going to be brightly lit. So that's where I can excuse the fact that a scary place is kind of in shadows and gloomy and dark. There's strange noises in the basement, noises that are being heard through the vent, noises in other rooms. And the dog has dreams of things that happened to the previous occupants, and he has hallucinations. So that was interesting to me. I didn't expect that. And it happens a couple times, and at first you're like, what? And then the dog will snap awake. Oh, sorry, my dog jumped when I did that. The dog will snap awake and you realize, oh, it was a dream. Oh, he was seeing visions. So that was really interesting. I also liked the relatable dog behaviors. I mean, if you have a dog, you know exactly, you know all the body language that goes on with the dog. You know the love and the dedication, the loyalty. There's one part in the film where the human goes away and he's gone like all day long. And the dog waits by the window for him the whole day. It was just like, oh, I know. It's so sad. I love dogs so much. There's also a scene where the dog gets scared and he does something very human-like. He hides under the bed. I like that. Having said all of that, there are some cons. They're not major, and they are not enough to really drag this down for me. I think I'm going to 4-star this one because it's very solid. I really like the uniqueness of it. I love the dog, and I thought it was executed very well. But some of the cons, some shots linger a bit too long. So because of that, the pacing drags a little bit. Even though this is not very long, it felt longer than it really was. There are repetitive moments and situations that happen. Like I said, shots lingering too long on the dog just looking and wondering what's going on, and a shot of just empty space and you're waiting for something to happen. You don't necessarily see it manifested, but you know something's odd. But it's just, these things happened quite a bit. The darkness. Now, I just said that I can forgive the fact that this story takes place in a dark setting because of the situation that they're living in, but sometimes the darkness was just too heavy. Even with all the lights in the room turned off. I had started off with some lights on in the room, not the major overhead light, but it was so hard to see what was happening. I turned off all the lights, and while that helped, even then, it was very hard to see what was happening. I boosted some brightness and or did like auto settings so that it could whatever. It didn't seem to help like I wanted it to. Maybe that was the entire point. You're not supposed to see everything. However, sometimes it was a little hard to even see the dog because he was in such shadow. What I had mentioned earlier about a con, as far as the lack of clarity, the ambiguity, that it's not fair, like I said, to call it a con, but it might feel like one for you. And another thing that was frustrating, you know how in horror movies when people do really stupid stuff and you're like, don't go into the scary room. You can forgive those actions with this protagonist because it's a dog. He's not going to necessarily behave exactly the way a human would. But it still aggravated me a bit that the owner didn't just go ahead and leave. Even when it seemed like maybe he was a little aware, maybe by then he was too far gone. I don't know, but it was a little agitating that he didn't pay enough attention to his dog. Sister was trying to warn him about the place. Dog's acting strange and he didn't pay enough. He's like, I'd be out of there so quick, but whatever, that's just me. But beyond that, those are not huge issues. Just stuff that did jump out at me enough that I wanted to mention it. And now the burning question before I get to my wrap up of this, because it's just about done. Normally, I don't like to spoil things, you guys, for a film that I think is worth watching, but I will spoil it for you because I know some of you do not like the idea of the dog possibly dying. If you don't want to know the answer to this, I'm going to put a little flashing whatever text thing to let you know where you can skip to. The answer to the burning question that most people have, if not everyone, the dog does not die. So if that was going to potentially hold you back from watching it, rest assured, don't need to do that. Go ahead and watch this. So there you go. I answered your question. My overall thoughts of this film, if you can't tell by now, I really appreciated the innovative concept of this. Even if the execution isn't perfect, it's still commendable to me what was done here. The fact that 3 years to make this film, dedication. I like the emotion. I like the suspense. Even if it was sometimes frustratingly unclear and hard to see what was happening. There's those minor pacing issues I talked about, but the originality really makes it stand out. So I can forgive those things. This is a unique, memorable indie horror film. I just saw it yesterday, so, it's a fresh film still on my mind, but I'm still going to be thinking about it for a while because the dog, it gave us a lead performance unlike most other movies that we see, especially in this genre. So I really appreciated it for that. And if you get around to watching it yourself, let me know what you think. All right, you guys. Bye.